When you grew up in Brooklyn, what your family was like, and before the war, what it was like for your life?
Well, we were a very close-knit family. I had two brothers and a sister, and we lived in a neighborhood like today. You know, the mall is 4 miles away. Get in the car and go to a mall. When we lived in Brooklyn, everything was a block away. If you wanted to go to a grocery store or a drugstore or anything like that, all you do is walk 1 block and everything was there for you. And then, of course, I went to a high school called Lafayette High School. It was a wonderful school. And I only put 3.5 years in there. I left the high school in my senior year. I think it must have been about 16 boys. We all volunteered at the same time. Each one of us took a different, either Army or Navy or Coast Guard, whatever it may be. And my mom, God bless my mother, she had 3 sons. My brother was in the Army, and he went as far in the 3rd Army, with Patton's Army. He went into Germany. And of course, I did the Atlantic and the Pacific. And my kid brother, we were so happy that he missed the Second World War. Then the Korean War came along, and he volunteered to go into the Marines. He was in the Chosin Reservoir when the Chinese hordes came over the top. And luckily, he survived. He was a BAR man. So my poor mother, she had 3 kids, all in combat. I don't know how she did it. My mother was a very strong person.
Why did you decide to sign up when you were in high school? What drove you to do that?
When Pearl Harbor happened, everybody was patriotic. Everybody wanted to go into the service and do their part. And I first started enlisting at 17, but my mom wouldn't sign for me. And I wanted to get in before the war ended. I thought in a year the war would end. I didn't know it was going to last 4 years. So I was anxious to get in. And I have no regrets. I met some very, very wonderful people. And I lost a lot of people. Yeah.
What was it like after you got in for you?
What's that?
What was it like after you got in the military for you?
When I got in?
Yeah.
You know, when you go into the military, what they do, they break you down. The first day that you're in, either the master sergeant or the chief petty officer says, I want you to forget everything that you know up till today, because from today on, you're going to be military, you're going to do it our way. And it's very ironic because today a lot of kids are committing suicide. The kids from Vietnam and Iraq, and we're losing a lot of kids from suicide. And I think the reason is because when we went in the service, we did 2 or 3 weeks basic training, and they taught us how to be military. And when the war ended, they gave me a piece of paper and $86 and put me on a train and sent me home. I was a lost person. We were all lost. They broke us down to bring us into the service, but they didn't do anything to, make it easy for us coming out. They should have like a basic training when you leave the service. That's why a lot of kids today, they come home and they're lost. The first time I had Liberty, I remember I had Liberty, I couldn't wait to go home to see my mom. I had 2 weeks. And I went there, and the first day I was very happy. I saw my mom and my brothers and sisters. The next day, my mom went to work. My kid brother went to school. My dad went to work. And there was nobody in my neighborhood my age because they were all in the service. And I was lost. I couldn't wait to go back to my ship. I was so happy to get Liberty. And after 2 days, I was happy to go back.
That is interesting. So, 75 years since D-Day now. which I'm sure doesn't seem like it to you.
No, it's yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Is it hard to think back on that?
Yeah. You know, a lot of people don't realize D-Day, they wrote a lot of books and a lot of movies about it. The whole D-Day was only 18 hours. We dropped the boats at 4 o'clock in the morning, and 10 o'clock at night, the beach was ours. It was only 18 hours, the whole thing. People make a big spectacle out of it, you know, D-Day, D-Day. It was 18 hours, that's all it was. But we did lose 2,000 men on the beach. I said men, I shouldn't say men. 2,000 kids. We were all kids. We were all kids. We were too young to drink. We were too young to vote. We weren't too young to die. 18 years old, 19, 20 years old. They were kids. Some of them didn't even shave. Never shaved. Yeah. And you're fighting Germans that were in the war for 4 years. Some of them came out of Russia. They were seasoned. And with all that, the season, us 18, 20-year-old kids, we ripped their ass.
Yes, indeed.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
I shouldn't use that language.
That's all right. What do you remember about that day?
What I remember the most, I'm going to tell you a story. I don't tell it to anybody because it's so hard for me. On the first wave, my job was to drop the ramp. And the machine guns were hitting the ramp in the front of the ramp. But I knew when I dropped the ramp, the machine gun was going to come into the boat. But I had to drop the ramp because the troops had to get out. This is the first wave. So when I dropped the ramp, the Germans had 14 machine guns, MG-42 machine guns, capable of 160 rounds a minute. When I dropped the ramp, all those machine guns opened up. And in the front of my boat, 7, 8, 10, 15 kids, I don't know, they just went down like you're cutting wheat. Now, I was 3/4 of the way back because I had to take the ramp and drop the ramp. So I was 3/4 of the way back. So I had some protection because the kids that were in front of me, the troops that were in front of me, they absorbed the bullets that were supposed to hit me. And they were falling down. And there was 2 kids, stragglers, I call them stragglers. They kept back because they didn't want to be in the front of the boat because they knew they would die. So they stayed back, and they stayed near me, which is a bad thing because besides the machine guns on the beach, there was a machine gun in the hill, and they were shooting down from the hill. So that was in a crossfire. And these 2 boys, since they stayed close to me, they were drawing fire to me. Now, the first boy was about 4 feet away from me. He got a machine gun in his stomach. His stomach was sticking out of his. Luckily, that kid, somehow, he survived the war, even though his stomach was ripped open. The second kid, he was about 2 feet away from me. He wasn't so lucky. The machine gun took his helmet off and part of his skull. And he was crying, "Help me, help me, help me." And he fell at my feet. And I couldn't help him. I had no morphine. I had nothing to help him. So the only thing I could do, I started praying for him. Our Father who art in heaven. And I never finished the prayer. And it seemed to soothe him. He stopped screaming, "Help me, help me," when I said the prayer. Then I reached down And I touched his hand. I touched his hand because I wanted him to know he wasn't alone. What little strength that he had, he put his fingers around my thumb and squeezed my thumb. It was almost as if he was saying, it's all right, it's all right. But I knew he was going to die. And at that moment, he spit up blood. And he died. He died. He was a kid, probably 18, 19, 20 years old. He had red hair. He died right in front of me. And I went into shock, I'll be honest. I went into shock. He was just a little boy. Just a little boy. I went into shock and I passed out. And I came to, I don't know, maybe a minute, 2 minutes. I don't know how long it was. And when I passed out, when I came to, rather, the coxswain was yelling, pick the ramp up, let's get out of here, because we were in a crossfire. And I pulled the lever and nothing happened. I pulled it the second time, nothing happened. I pulled it the third time, then I put it on automatic. It never came up. So my job now was to take that ramp. Everybody was depending upon me. So I had to get to the ramp. I was 3/4 of the way back. I couldn't even see the ramp because there were dead bodies in front of me. So I had to crawl over the dead bodies. And I must have been a madman because I was crying. And I'm saying to these kids that are dead, forgive me for walking over you. And I started going towards the ramp. And somehow another kid came along. To this day, I don't know who it is. Either a crewman or maybe another soldier, I don't know. And we started crawling towards the ramp. And when we got towards the ramp, I realized why the ramp wouldn't come up. There was 2 dead soldiers on the ramp. They never got out of the boat. So they were waterlogged because they were on the ramp. Plus they had 90 pounds of, each soldier had 90 pounds of equipment on their back. Excuse me a second. There was no way I was going to move this guy. I weighed 125 pounds. I couldn't lift him up. So what I did, I pointed to his belt, to the other guy. And I grabbed the belt, and I started pulling. And when I pulled, he moved about 2 or 3 inches. And right then and there, I knew I could do this. I could do this. So I little by little, probably took 40 minutes, 30 minutes, I don't know. I got him off the ramp, and the ramp went up. Now the coxswain had to get the boat. There was all obstacles in the water. There was mines in the water, and we were right in the middle of them, and there was telephone poles. And the top of the telephone poles was the mine, just sitting there. It wasn't nailed down or screwed down. It was just sitting on top of the telephone pole. If your boat nudged that telephone pole, the mine would come in your boat, killing everybody. Now, these were not an ordinary mine. These were telemines. A telemine, when they explode, they don't explode up. They explode sideways. Take a man's legs off. So the coxswain, God bless him, he was so good. He got us out of this mess. And we headed back towards my ship. And we had a lot of boys that were wounded pretty bad. And they were crying, Mama, Mama, Mama. And when we headed towards my ship, we saw this big white ship with a red cross on the side. It was a hospital ship. So instead of going towards my ship, we went towards the hospital ship because we figured if we can get some of these wounded guys aboard that hospital ship, maybe we could save some lives. If we could save one life, it was worth it. So we pulled alongside the hospital ship, and 2 angels jumped in my boat. I called them angels because they did something we couldn't do. We were spent. We couldn't do anything. And what they did, they peeled off the dead soldiers to get to the wounded soldiers. And they were able to get about 7, I don't remember exactly, could have been 7, could have been 8, I don't know. And they got these wounded boys, and they put them in the hospital ship. And I said to myself, I said, thank God, these kids stand a chance. Maybe they're going to live this day. And with that, the 2 guys that were on the boat went back to the hospital ship. And we went back to my ship. When we got back to my ship, we still had wounded aboard. Not serious, but we had wounded aboard. And we had dead aboard the boat. And so when we got close to my boat, they dropped a sled so we could put the dead bodies and the wounded. And then the crane took them up. And somebody yelled, I want 1 man from every boat to come aboard to be interrogated. So I got on the sled and I went aboard. When I went aboard, I'm on the ship. Stay with me a minute, stay with me. I'm alive. I'm alive. And I got to make a decision. Do I stay aboard the ship and let somebody take my place? Or do I go back into the belly of the beast and face those machine guns again? And I said to myself, this is what I was trained to do. And I made 15 trips. And they told me I didn't know that. They told me we made 15 trips with my boat. The PA 2628 made 15 trips. So then I had to be interrogated. There was a naval officer and a sergeant. He had a lot of stripes on him, great big sergeant. He put his hand on my shoulder. He said, son, that hand was like a hug. I needed a hug. And he touched me. And he says, son, he says, those machine guns can only fire so long. Then they have to change the barrel. You wait. And when they're changing the barrel, that's when you drop the ramp again. So I said, all right. I said, how much time do I have? He said, 7 to 10 seconds. That's not much time. But I did like he told me. And I waited and I waited. And while I was waiting, the troops aboard the boat start screaming, let the ramp down, we got to get out of here. They felt closed and they wanted to go out and be killed. So I waited and I waited, I waited, and all of a sudden there was a lull. They had to change the barrels. And I dropped the ramp. And this time I got 8 guys on the beach. Of course, they were cut down immediately. I'd rather not go any further.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, understand. Let me ask you this. You talked earlier about how you didn't talk about this for a long time. Why'd you decide to talk about it now?
For 70 years, I never mentioned it. My family, my son is here, he can tell you. When we were on the beach with Tom Brokaw, and Tom Brokaw says to me, he says, I understand you have a big book with all pictures of the battles that you fought. And my son said, what book? I never told anybody anything. It was too hard to talk about. So somehow, Tom Brokaw, he got it out of me. He asked me a few questions. And once the genie was out of the bottle, you can't put it back. And then after that, I wanted to talk about it. And I go to seminars, I go to Columbine High School, and I talk to these young kids. I went to the USAA, the insurance company, and I talked to them. I wanted to get out now so they don't forget what we had to go through. We fought for peace. The Germans fought to kill, and we fought for peace.
You're going back for the 75th anniversary in June, and you're taking your whole family, you said, and a lot of your friends, and a big group. And what do you think it's going to be like, thinking back 75 years at that time?
It's going to be a madhouse. It's going to be a madhouse. The 70th anniversary, there were buses backed up from here to Brooklyn. I mean, nothing moves. This is going to be the 75th. It's going to be much, much, much worse. Nothing's going to move. We already got some itineraries that they're closing highways. Nobody's going to get through. The highways are going to be closed. So if you want to go to the beach, you got to get there probably 4 o'clock in the morning before everything starts. Because if you wait till later on, you're not going to see anything. Yeah.
But it's important to you to go back.
It's very important for me to go back. Yeah, yeah. And God bless people like Jake who take us back. Because if it wasn't people like Jake, we probably wouldn't go back because it's very expensive. Maybe we would have done it one time, but not 11 times, 10 or 11 times. It's 2 people like him that were able to do this.
You not only think it's important to pass along this message to kids, obviously, because you talk to kids a lot, but when you go back with kids and say you're on the beach or whatever, or in one of the museums or whatever, and you see their faces, what does it mean to you?
You mean the kids?
Yeah.
You know, we have a tendency in this country to put the young generation down. We got a great generation coming up. These kids are great. They're smart. They're much smarter than I was, than all of us were. And I love talking to them because they ask very pertinent. One of the kids asked me if I was killed during the war. But other than that, they asked some very, very, very good questions. So I could see I'm getting through to them. About 3 or 4 months ago, the church that I go to, the Monsignor, he knew that I was in the war. And he said, Frank, he says, how about talking to the congregation? So I said, all right. And the whole church was there. And I gave my spiel like I just told you and stuff like that. And then there was question and answers. And one woman raised her hand. And she said to me, why don't you write a book? And I thought about it. But I couldn't write it because while I'm writing, the tears would come down on the paper. And I probably have a little blob of paper. So I decided not to write a book. But I will talk about it. I want to get it out there so people don't forget. It's like the Holocaust. We should never forget. We should never forget. I can't understand how a group of educated people, the Germans, these people went to the opera. They took their kids to Sunday school. They went on picnics. These are not Mongolians. These were educated people. How could they do such a thing? How could they do such a thing?
It's an important lesson, for sure.
Yeah.
That we need to get across. This is my last question, I promise. I just met you, obviously, but I can already tell that you're very proud of what you accomplished over there. Talk about that.
I get too emotional, though. I still cry to this day. Many a nights I'm in bed, I can't sleep. And I think of that kid with the red hair, and the side of his face was shot away. He was a young kid. And I think of that kid. He was only one. There was hundreds around me that died or were wounded. But this one kid touched my heart because he fell to my feet. And he was asking me, help me, help me. I couldn't help him. I couldn't help myself. How could I help him?
But you know you all made such a big difference over there. I mean, who knows what the world would be like, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm going to be 94 in May. So there's not going to be any more Frank Devitas. So we got to get the word out before we're gone. Because 10 years down the road, there's not going to be any Frank Devitas or anybody that was in Normandy or Pearl Harbor or what. It's going to be forgotten history. So we shouldn't let it die.
You are terrific. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.